It's been 162 days, 12 hours, 7 minutes, and 13 seconds since Memphis Spence has been on AYS. I have no
That
idea.
long?
I have no idea if that's accurate, Memphis. I have zero clue if that's if that is accurate at all or not. But nevertheless, it's so good to have you back. Just like Sam Ellinger, we're back.
Let's get it rolling too, Blake, because you know there's a lot to talk about. NIL, Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Memphis in a battle for all of the world's sanctity. Jimbo Fisher versus Nick Saban in a 12-round match. Who's coming out on top?
Are we talking about recruiting?
We're talking about all in recruiting. Well, yes, recruiting.
I can tell you this. I'll say this: Jimbo Fisher. There really isn't. Nick Saban usually doesn't have anybody breathing down his neck. There aren't that many people qualified to put their foot on Nick Saban's neck. If there's somebody that's still coaching in terms of recruiting that can say that, even more than Brian Kelly, is Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher's always been able to recruit, which is why the comments that Nick Saban made today let me know that he's worried about something. He's worried about the impending future, and he's serious. This wasn't just, verbiage. This wasn't coach speak. He was basically telling his boosters and telling the general public that Alabama may not be able to withstand what he sees coming if NIL is still used the way he believes it's being used at Texas A&M. Because I can't remember now. I know that Jimbo Fisher was at Florida State from 2010 to 2017 before he went over. I can't remember a year where Jimbo Fisher had a recruiting class less than 15.
All right, hold on one second, Memphis. Zach, to our producer, Zach. Zach, look that up. Give us the 2010 to 2017 Florida State recruiting rankings. Memphis,
because I can't remember a time where he was less than 15. There may have been a time, and there may have been a year that he missed, but generally he was top 10 in every one of those years. I may be missing a year or something like that, but Jimbo Fisher can recruit, and he always has been able to recruit. And that's why this it sounded a little hollow. It sounded like good old Nick was a little scared of what he sees as impending doom for how they're handling NIL, which, I'll be honest, was the intended purpose of it, and how Texas A&M may be handling NIL, because we really don't know how they're handling NIL. And that's kind of when Nick Saban starts sounding the alarms, it's usually because he's behind. I heard Nick Saban scared once before. It was a couple years back where the early recruiting period came in December. He was late to the game. That was the year Georgia was number 1. I think Saban, Alabama was 4 or 5 that year, a couple years back. And because he was late to the game, he was blaming everything and everybody and pointing the fingers other places other than inside of his program and himself, because that's kind of what Nick Saban kind of does in these situations.
It's what a narcissist does.
I wasn't going to go there, but Jimbo Fisher did. And to be fair, Jimbo Fisher had some really legitimate points about how we treat Nick Saban, because Nick Saban ain't Jesus. You and I know who Jesus is, and Nick Saban ain't that man. You know what I'm saying? Nick Saban is not our God. I don't treat him as God. I look at everybody that I interview, whether it be a somebody that's going to the NFL, a coach. I was just talking to in these chats or whatnot. I was just talking to somebody and telling them about all the different types of coaches that I got a chance to speak with, and I treat them all the same. They're men like you and I. And sometimes those men lie. Sometimes those men point fingers, and we're just trying to get to the truth. We're trying to get to the bottom of things. So the idea that we've kind of put Nick Saban on a pedestal, I think Jimbo Fisher, in some respects, is right about that. I also think that Nick Saban is right about a lot of what he said in terms of how certain collectives are using NIL. NIL in general was supposed to be, hey, you get to this university, you're here now. Here's some opportunities outside of, your normal package. Get yourself an agent or whatnot, and you can take advantage of these opportunities. They'll fish it out for you. Your performance here can raise your name, likeness, and image so that you can take advantage of these opportunities out there, basically. It's smart. When we were thinking about this maybe 5-6 years ago on my show, I was going to say smart companies, and I thought there were going to be mostly Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies are going to say, all right, now that guy just hit the game-winning shot. What's his name? Doug Edert or whatever? Hey, go get that man some chicken wing. What does he like to eat?
Find a deal. Interrupt you. It's like the kid in college football last year from Kansas, the fullback who scored when they beat Texas, and they asked him what he was going to do.
Right.
He says, I'm going to Applebee's, and Applebee's sponsors him.
That's what NIL is supposed to be. An opportunity where these bigger corporations can say, hey, this guy just did something great in sports. You see him on the SportsCenter top 10. His name's rolling around on the internet. They can say, okay, that can give us X amount of value if we market our product with this person. So that's what NIL is supposed to be. What it became, and what I had a little bit of privy, because there are a couple of people that kind of ran some of this by me, these collectives. And the collectives, they were set up basically to take money from boosters and funnel it to student athletes. The issue that Nick Saban has, and the issue that a lot of people are going to have with this, is if that funneling occurs before that student has actually signed on the dotted line to attend your university. I would even wait till that person's actually on campus enrolled before any NIL opportunities come. However, apparently, or what's being alleged, is that there are collectives that are going and saying, hey, this would be your NIL opportunity if you would sign on a dotted line, which is inducing a student athlete to get to your university. And that, by all means, is still against the rules. It's against the fundamental rules that shut SMU down. Or I need SMU to get some sort of, the NCAA, if they don't shut this down, the NCAA better go and give some restitution to that program, because that program suffered the most out of all of them from how we've been doing this and how we've been governing over these years, Blake.
So a couple things. Number one, I agree with you. Like Shannon Sharp said on Hard Knocks, I want my restitution. I agree. I agree with that. I agree that it seems like he's scared. The one thing that scares me, though, is Nick's always done this. He gets spread offense, this, that, or third, and all of a sudden, Spence, in a couple of years, we look up and like, why did y'all have to piss his ass off? So I got two things for you, and I want to give you the recruiting rankings for Jimbo right after this.
Okay.
The thing for me is I hear guys, and I like Pete Thamel. Pete Thamel is one of the most connected guys in college athletics. I can't take it away from him. But today I was listening to him, and he talked about on Paul Feinbaum that there's absolutely nothing that the NCAA can do. That's not true, because you have stuff built into NIL, which they passed, that if you entice a player to go to your school through NIL, you're breaking multiple level 1 violations.
That's right.
Honestly, it's horse shit, if we're being honest, that we can't do anything. Says whom? And here's another thing. They talk about state laws. Well, state laws will overdo it. Sounds good. You're all signed into the NCAA. It doesn't matter what's going on. You want to play in March Madness? You can't no more if you don't do this. That's how I would play it. That's exactly how I'd play it.
First of all, you're absolutely right, Blake. You are absolutely right about that. They have all signed into the NCAA. If you want those games that the NCAA sanctioned, which is all the regular season games, to count, then of course they can do something. They can do something like they've done to Memphis, like they've done to LSU, like they've done to a lot of these programs. They can do the same thing. The NCAA hasn't lost the power to act. Right now, they're scared to act because Mark Emmert's stepping down next year in June, and nobody really wants to pick up the mantle and start going after programs because we have like a lame duck season with the NCAA president right now. That's what's really going on.
Well, let me tell you this. Make me college football's commissioner.
Let's do it.
I will advise Alabama, if you don't fire Saban on the spot, or unless he goes back to LSU to be the defensive coordinator for Brian Kelly, he is fired. That's what I do. That's just me. Zach Lee, though, our producer, to your point, Spence, which confirms your point, per 247's composite score rankings,
okay,
Jimbo Fisher was number 8, number 2, number 4, number 4, number 3, number 3, number 6. It's not like he couldn't recruit.
He's always been able to recruit. That's why I'm like, well, wait a minute now. He just got to Texas. Now, a program that hasn't been able to recruit is Texas A&M, right? Texas A&M, before they got to the SEC, they didn't have the facilities, they didn't have the revenue, they didn't have anything in order to recruit. They get to the SEC, and we follow this on my show. The revenue, the generation of revenue since Texas A&M has been in the SEC has caught up and surpassed Texas in some years, which is why Texas is coming. Because Texas doesn't want to play second fiddle in their own state.
$35 million more from the SEC than the Big 12.
Absolutely.
$35 million.
It's ridiculous. And so that's why Texas is coming. Texas is like, wait a minute. Now we're second in revenue. If we can't beat anybody on the field, we've at least been able to beat people at the bank. Now they can't even do that to their little brother. That's why they're coming to the SEC. So Texas A&M now has the revenue, now has the support, now has all of that coming in, and they just needed the crown jewel. Let me go get the guy that can recruit, has always been able to recruit, bring him over, and now we can start competing with Saban. It's working. Saban got beat last year, and he's pissed. He's pissed because he realizes what's going on, and he's like, man, I'm 70. I didn't expect to start competing now. I expected to kind of coast out. Why are people competing with me right now? I wanted to sit on my throne for 4 or 5 more years and win a couple more championships and throw a deuce sign out as the greatest coach that ever did this. And now I have real competition breathing down my neck, even in my own division. And I don't know whether or not the SEC is going to get rid of divisions. The Pac-12 did. But if that happens, then all of a sudden you're exposed to Georgia and Florida. You may actually have to play some legit schedules in the SEC, and it's going to get bloody.
I fully agree with you. Big Jake says, #AskSpence, what did you think of Antonio Cromartie's comment about being asked to help recruit during probation period? Here's the thing. Here's the only thing about Antonio. I like him. I've talked to him multiple times. He works for Jimbo Fisher and A&M. So his words are going to be biased to the fullest degree. I don't know, Spence, if you agree with that or not, but that's how I see it.
That's absolutely. Whenever you're sourcing something, you always look, well, what's that source doing now? What's that source done before? And does that source have any inherent biases, right? Cromartie does, obviously. And you know that. And I'm glad that you pointed that out.
$100,000 to sit in Jimbo's office.
Right.
I'll hold somebody's water jug. Go ahead.
That being said, though, what he's saying may actually ring true. I don't know. We have to take it with a grain of salt because of what he does. But what he said, I'm like, well, I don't know. If he can bring some more evidence to this, if he can, how was this offered back then? I know they weren't, DMing or Twitter at that point in time. How was this offered? Who offered it to you? When was this offered? If he can come up with some actual facts, I'm not saying that comment won't hold weight. It's just where it's coming from right now is kind of tainted just by who he's associated with right now. But I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying that we should take that with a grain of salt until he can provide a little bit more proof behind that statement.
Well, here's the biggest thing, and Spence, I don't know if you heard it from earlier. When Nick Saban came to LSU in 2000, the next season they had the number 1 recruiting class. LSU's never had the most recruiting class. At the time, it was most 5 stars in the history of recruiting rankings that had gone to one school. Then, when he goes to Alabama, they go 7-6. A fat little chubby dude who signed with Southeastern Louisiana, sitting in Shreveport, watching Alabama versus Colorado, and I'm screaming, "Go Buffs, go! Saban sucks." Within a week, or within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was, he signs the number 1 recruiting class in the country to Alabama. The next year, they win a national title. You mean to tell me that that man didn't cheat? Spence, there's a lot of what he's saying is true, right? And I want to get to the truth in this and where you think college football is going, because there is a lot of truth to it. It doesn't mean he could have worded it so much more differently than the way he did to impact all of college athletics, but he chose to be narcissistic and think about himself more than anybody else. Here's what I'm going to ask you, though. Where do we go from here? Like, what do we do if the NCAA isn't going to come down? Because, look, he's not lying. Okay, I don't believe that Travis Hunter only went to Jackson State because of money. But here's what I do know about Jackson State. Just got a brand new field house and a new locker room. Spence, it cost over $2.5 million per that public records request. Where's Deion getting that money? I don't care. I will be a booster of Jackson State my damn self. Okay. There are a lot of reasons why Travis Hunter goes there. It's not just one. There's so many things. But how do we regulate all this? What do we do?
Here's the first thing that needs to happen. And it's really a failure to act. See, what Nick Saban said was true, but then he went off and tried to defend the NCAA. Which so NCAA is indefensible right now because the actual legislation that should have happened long before when they were putting NIL in place last year.
Oh God, so true.
We are going to penalize any university in which we find out that NIL was provided to them prior to signing on the dotted line. There are ways that they can do that. There's investigations that they do that. Heck, if they were able to figure out that Penny Hardaway gave James Wiseman's mother $11,000 4 years before either one of them show up to Memphis and hold our feet to the fire, you're darn sure that they can figure out whether or not a student athlete received NIL before, or NIL deals or offers before they show up to the university. They can do it. The question is, will they act? It's a failure to act. And this is another thing. Mark Emmert now, since he's a lame duck and since he's stepping down, I was reluctant to actually just, put him on a dartboard. But this is a clear and present failure of his tenure. We've been talking about NIL on my show for about 6 years now. And we've been coming through it like, okay, we want to pay players. How do we do that? We don't want to pay them out of the university coffers because that starts putting employment issues into play. Who's getting this type of pay? Who's not? Title IX comes into play. Insurance benefits come into play. Wait a minute, what do you mean that the student athletes have more better benefits than the professors? When you start making somebody an employee, and a lot of you all who are employers know that, then there's employment law for a long years that you have to actually start following per state. And so we were like, okay, why don't you just let the market handle itself? Let the market pay the kids, and you don't have to worry about it. Just make sure that you put some guidelines in place so that they are actually eligible. Because you know who this is going to hurt? It's going to hurt the student athletes. It's going to hurt the athletes. They're going to become ineligible, and then the programs are going to suffer because the programs are going to be playing with ineligible players. That's how it always works. The NCAA could actually legislate this. They could drop the hammer. The reason why they're doing it is because they're complicit in this. They are complicit in what's going on in college football right now. And at some point in time, they're the ones that are going to have to pay the piper because it should be a back and forth. These universities signed up to actually be protected and have a level playing field with the NCAA. And if the NCAA is failing to act or failing to protect their interests, there's got to be some recompense from that. Nick Saban's like, well, they're getting sued so many times. They're getting sued because they're not acting from a position of leadership. They're doing reactionary actions. They're reacting after the fact instead of leading with some sort of guidance.
Here's what I'm going to say too. Now, hear me out, Memphis. Just hear me out on this.
Yeah.
I still think Nick's been talking about there's so much parity in college football. No, there's not.
No.
College football is very chalky. Okay, the teams that are up top normally always win. Now, will you have teams that come in and out relatively? Florida State's in the playoff the first year. They haven't been there. Oregon, LSU gets in there, wins it. Clemson, but normally it's chalky. Here's the thing, though. We know, and there are a lot of false rumors. Okay, just stay with me here. I know for a fact of a kid that's getting paid $75,000 a 5-star, $75,000 a semester. Nick, you're getting paid $19 million a year, plus you have a lot of things going on. Look, you were paying the kids out of your pocket to start off with. Why aren't you finding a way to do it now? Why do they need NIL? I think Memphis. Here's my thing. So an associate AD from a SEC school told me this, not LSU, but they told me this. Blake, honestly, you could pay 10 of the top recruits in the country by using $2 to $3 million if you wanted to. Memphis, how much were you paying to start underneath the table? I still think we're seeing all of the chaos that was behind the scenes and covered up in the open. It's like, that's how I just see this going on. But I am really scared, though. Here's what I'm really scared about, and I want your thoughts on this. There's always got to be a rule of law, right? Yes. I hear a lot of people saying the NCAA is going under. It won't be here in 2 years. And that, more than anything, scares the bejesus out of me, because when you don't have rule and order, it will be the Wild West. Is it just going to be a conference by conference thing, or what do you think? How is this all going to end and we're back to the new normal?
Well, we have to figure out with the NCAA what their purpose is. There's a come to Jesus meeting that they need to figure out exactly what their purpose is moving forward for the next 20, 25 years, where they're going to play in this. How are they going to govern? Are we going to move away from a central dictator type thing? Or are we going to start going towards more of a jury type situation where you have a board that's getting together and making decisions? Because one man won't act right now, nothing's happening. I don't like that moving forward. I would rather see, a collective of some of the best minds in college, in sports period, all sitting on a board, make it like a Supreme Court of NCAA or whatever. If you want them elected there or something, that's fine. But people who we can point to, that if one person doesn't act and one person doesn't show leadership, everything falls apart. I don't like that model anymore. Moving forward, I think, honestly, we should really look at making the NCAA more of a governing body than a governing person at the top. And also, back to what you were saying, Blake, and we say this on the show, Queen Berger's coined this. Whenever you don't see a free market, you see a black market. And there's always something going on behind the scenes, regardless of what it is. If it's drugs, if it's alcohol, whatever you try to ban, and it creates a black market. And what's in the black market is way worse usually than if you actually regulate it and govern it in the light. We've seen that plenty of times across a lot of different things. Money is something. As a matter of fact, the whole reason why we're here is the Fed stepped in and said, something, we need to, if they're not going to, seriously police their own laws, there's a whole lot of tax money out here that we're missing. We're missing millions of dollars under the table in tax revenue, which is why, the second district of New York kicked in the door a few years ago on basketball. That was the reason. They were missing tax revenue. And we were there for that as well. The point is, if they don't do it, somebody will. because it's still revenue moving, and how it moves. And if it's not regulated in some sort, the government will end up regulating, because you're not going to mess around with interstate commerce and get away with the federal government. They're going to pay their taxes. And that's another thing that we need to actually point out, is there needs to be a whole lot more education. We hear a lot of rumors because people don't really know what should be and what shouldn't be NIL laws. There are people that consult me. There are people consult a lot of other people, like, well, what, we're setting up a collective. What are we supposed to do? How is this supposed to go? What are some guidelines?
Like, wait a minute. At the end of the year,
let's start. What state are you in? Because different states have different guidelines. Missouri actually did something in their legislature last week. And I think that everybody should actually go out and read what Missouri did in their legislature, because they gave the power back to their universities and their coaching staff to interact with collectives, to provide guidelines, to provide guidance.
Right. Louisiana's doing the same.
Should be doing.
Right. Louisiana's doing the same, to your point.
There you go. That's how I think, in my opinion, that's how I think a lot of state legislatures are going, or that's where a lot of state legislatures are going to end up. I've already been on the phone with my congressman. We're going to get this thing together in Tennessee. We're going to get it together in a lot of these states, and we're going to make sure that we're providing, because the compliance department, every school has a compliance department. They should be allowed to do their job, and we should write in the laws the ability for them to go out and do their job and police NIL. They don't want any ineligible students. And if, like Nick Saban said, if they got NIL from a collective before they got here and you don't see them on the field, that's why. Because, we still have to do compliance at this school, and we still have to make sure that students are eligible to play. And if they're not, because they got a deal or a car or whatnot, and they're not playing and you're not getting a return on your investment, that's your fault. But at least Missouri has already scripted into their laws where the schools themselves and those compliance departments can talk to all of the collectives, and I think everybody's going to be there at some point in time within a short future.
All right, so look, we got to get out of here. You've been fantastic, but yeah. I want to end it with this. I haven't forgot that we have not discussed about Will Wade using a joint bank account with his wife and got caught by the NCAA with NCAA level 1 violations. You called it. You said it was coming. To be continued, because I'm not done with this Will Wade shit. And me and you got to talk about this on the open air about how Will Wade could be so incompetent to use a joint bank account. All right, we'll be here for the rest of the night. I can't do it. Memphis, you're one of my most favorite people on the planet. Tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff and everything that you're doing.
The Sports Radio America Network, 11th year in business. The College Credit Hour is my show. Come hang out with the boosters around the nation that listen, noon to 2 Eastern, Mondays and Thursdays right now. We're still doing it. We're still having real conversations about what's going on behind the scenes, pulling the curtain back, and I'm the man behind the curtain.